The crystal chandelier cast glittering light across the five-star restaurant as snow pounded against the windows. New Year's Eve, the most exclusive night of the year. I said no tables. Lady, get out! Marco, the restaurant manager, jabbed his finger at Victoria's face. His voice cut through the elegant dining room like a knife. Victoria stood frozen in her simple coat, clutching a crumpled reservation slip. I booked table 8 last week. Please check your system. Marco laughed and ripped the silk scarf from her neck, throwing it to the marble floor. Table 8? I gave it to Mr. David over there. He tipped me $500. What have you got? Nothing but cheap perfume and gold digger dreams. The wealthy diners turned to stare, their phones already recording. Marco snapped his fingers at 2 massive security guards. Drag this trash out to the snow. Now. The guards stepped forward, cracking their knuckles. Victoria's eyes filled with tears of rage. 10 minutes earlier, in the corner booth by the window, Silas Morrison sat hunched over a small pile of crumpled bills and loose change. His weathered hands counted each coin twice, making sure he had enough for 1 small pizza and 2 glasses of water. His 5-year-old daughter Lily pressed her nose against the cold window, watching snowflakes dance in the streetlight. She pointed at a nearby table where a family was cracking open bright red lobster shells. Daddy, how come we can't have the pretty red fish like them? Silas's heart cracked a little. He reached over and smoothed down her messy blonde hair. The same color his wife's had been. Next year, sweetheart. Daddy will work harder next year. Tonight. We're here to watch the snow and be together. That's what matters most. Lily nodded, but her eyes stayed on the lobster table. She was trying to understand why some people had so much while others had so little. The pizza arrived, thin crust, barely enough cheese, smaller than Silas had expected. He gave Lily the bigger slice and pretended he wasn't hungry. She ate slowly, making it last. That's when the woman in the simple coat walked in. Silas noticed her immediately. She was about his late wife's age, maybe 35. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No fancy jewelry. She moved carefully, like someone trying not to take up too much space in the world. Something about her reminded him of Sarah, the quiet dignity, the gentle way she carried herself, the way she held herself together, even when the world was crushing down. The woman approached the host stand with hopeful eyes. Silas heard her soft voice asking politely about table 8. He watched Marco's face change from fake politeness to cold disgust. Then the shouting started. Silas saw Marco grab the woman's scarf like she was nothing. Saw him call her a gold digger in front of everyone. Saw the wealthy customers pulling out their phones to film her humiliation. But what made Silas's blood boil was the word Marco spat at her next. Worthless whore. Silas was a father to a little girl. He'd buried a wife who'd been gentle and kind. He would not sit quietly while any man used those words about any woman. Not tonight. Not ever. Silas placed his fork down carefully and deliberately. The metal clanked against the ceramic plate like a bell signaling war had begun. He stood up purposefully. The 2 security guards moved like wolves closing in on prey. They grabbed Victoria by both arms, their thick fingers digging into her shoulders as she tried to pull away. Let go of me. Victoria's voice cracked with panic and rage. I have a reservation. I have rights. But Marco just laughed, a cold sound that cut through the restaurant's elegant atmosphere. Rights, lady, the only right you have is the right to get out of my restaurant. The guards started dragging her toward the door. Victoria's feet slipped on the polished marble floor as she struggled against their grip. Her simple coat twisted around her body, and she could feel every eye in the restaurant watching her humiliation. That's when her thin wool sweater caught on the corner of a chair. The fabric ripped with a sharp tearing sound. A large piece tore away from her shoulder. exposing pale skin to the cold air. Victoria gasped and tried to cover herself, but the guards kept pulling her forward. The wealthy diners erupted in laughter. "Oh my God, look at that." A woman in diamonds pointed her finger. She can't even afford clothes that fit." Mr. David, the man who'd stolen Victoria's table, pulled out his phone and started recording. "This is going straight to Instagram." More phones appeared. Camera flashes lit up Victoria's face as she stumbled toward the door. Half naked and powerless, the sound of cruel laughter mixed with the click of camera shutters. "Please," Victoria whispered, but her voice was lost in the noise. Marco strutted behind them like a king leading a parade. "This is what happens when trash tries to eat with decent people," he announced. "I run a classy establishment here." The crowd cheered him on like he was some kind of hero. That's when Victoria heard another sound cutting through the chaos, the sharp clink of metal against ceramic. Every head turned toward the corner booth where Silas had been sitting quietly with his daughter. The man with the weathered hands and threadbare jacket was on his feet now. Lily looked up at her father with wide eyes. "Daddy, what's happening to the nice lady?" Silas's jaw was tight as steel. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. For a moment, he looked exactly like what he was. A construction worker who'd spent years dealing with bullies on job sites. "Stay here, sweetheart," he told Lily softly. "Daddy needs to help someone." Silas walked across the restaurant with long, determined strides. The crowd of wealthy diners parted in front of him. Suddenly unsure when faced with a man who clearly had nothing left to lose, he reached the security guards just as they got to the door. "Excuse me," Silas said quietly. The first guard turned around, still holding Victoria's arm. He was twice Silas's size, with arms like tree trunks. "Back off. This ain't your business." Silas looked him dead in the eye. "I'm making it my business." Then he grabbed the guard's wrist and twisted it with the kind of precise force that comes from 20 years of manual labor. The guard yelped and let go of Victoria immediately. The second guard reached for his radio, but Silas was faster. He stepped between Victoria and both guards, spreading his arms to shield her from view without hesitation. Silas pulled off his own jacket, the only decent piece of clothing he owned, and wrapped it gently around Victoria's shoulders. The jacket was old and worn, but it was warm and it covered the tear in her sweater completely. "There," he said softly, making sure the jacket was secure. "Better?" Victoria stared up at him in shock. This stranger, this man who clearly had so little, was giving her his coat and standing against two men who could easily hurt him. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Marco boomed across the restaurant. Silas turned to face him slowly. When he spoke, his voice was calm but carried the weight of absolute certainty. "I'm sorry, my wife was late for dinner," Silas said clearly. "She's not looking for a rich man because she has me, and if you say one more word about my wife, I'll show you what real anger looks like." The entire restaurant went silent. Victoria's mouth fell open. This stranger was claiming to be her husband, protecting her in front of everyone. No. Marco's face turned purple with rage.
"Did you hear that? She has me." Oh my goodness. Silas just stood up against the whole room to protect a stranger's dignity. He didn't use violence. He used honor. But Marco looks furious. I'm scared for Silas now. What is he going to do against security guards?
For a moment, the restaurant held its breath. Even the wealthy diners stopped their cruel laughter, sensing that something had shifted. Marco's embarrassment curdled into pure rage. His face went from purple to black as he realized this poor man had made him look like a fool in front of his richest customers. "Oh, I see what's happening," Marco said, his voice dripping with venom. "A couple of beggars decided to team up and scam my restaurant." He started walking toward Silas and Victoria, fists clenched. The other diners backed away, understanding that this was about to get ugly. You think you're some kind of hero? Marco spat at Silas. Coming in here with your charity case wife, trying to make me look bad. I own this place. I am the king here. Silas didn't move. He kept his arm around Victoria's shoulders, his other hand reaching back to make sure Lily stayed behind him. Sir, we don't want any trouble, Silas said calmly. We just want to have dinner in peace. Peace? Marco laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You want peace? Here's your piece. He snapped his fingers, and suddenly there weren't just 2 security guards anymore. 3 more appeared from different corners, all carrying black batons. They formed a circle around Silas, Victoria, and little Lily. The wealthy customers pulled out their phones again, but this time they weren't laughing. This was about to become something much more serious. You made me look stupid in front of my guests, Marco hissed. So now I'm going to teach you what happens to people who don't know their place. Victoria saw the guards raising their batons. She saw Silas trying to shield both her and his daughter with his own body. She couldn't let this happen. Not to him. Not because of her. Stop! Victoria shouted, stepping forward. You don't know who I am. Marco turned to her with a sneer. Oh, here we go. Let me guess. You're some kind of secret celebrity? A Russian princess? The Queen of England, maybe? The crowd started laughing again, but Victoria pressed on desperately. I'm serious. If you hurt him, if you hurt us, you'll regret it. I can destroy this place. I can destroy you. Marco's eyes went wide with mock surprise. Oh no, she's going to destroy me. He made exaggerated, frightened gestures that sent the rich customers into fresh laughter. Then his face went cold. Lady, I don't care if you're the president's daughter. In here, I'm God, and God is about to teach you a lesson you'll never forget. He nodded to the security guards. Break his legs, both of them. Make sure he never walks into my restaurant again. The guards stepped forward, batons raised. That's when Victoria did something that shocked everyone in the room, including herself. She stepped directly in front of the largest guard and slapped Marco across the face as hard as she could. The sound echoed through the restaurant like a gunshot. Marco staggered backward, his hand flying to his cheek. For a moment, he looked stunned. Then his face contorted with absolute fury. You just made the biggest mistake of your worthless life, he whispered. He raised his own hand and struck Victoria with twice the force she'd used on him. The slap sent her stumbling backward into Silas's arms. Her cheek immediately turned bright red, and tears sprang to her eyes. Nobody, Marco screamed. Nobody hits me in my own restaurant. Marco raised his hand again, ready to strike Victoria a second time. The security guards tightened their grip on batons, preparing to beat Silas in front of his daughter. That's when a chair scraped loudly across the marble floor. Everyone turned to see Mr. David, the wealthy man who had stolen Victoria's table, rising slowly from his seat. His face was dark with fury, and he looked anything but civilized. Marco, David said, his voice cutting through the restaurant like a blade. Put your hand down. Marco laughed, still high on his own power. What, David? Don't tell me you're feeling sorry for these beggars, too. I thought you had class. David started walking toward them with measured steps. I said put your hand down now? Or what? Marco sneered. You'll tell your friends not to eat here. There's a waiting list a mile long for my restaurant. I don't need... David's fist connected with Marco's jaw with the force of a sledgehammer. The restaurant manager went flying backward, crashing into a table and sending crystal glasses shattering to the floor. He hit the ground hard and didn't get up. blood trickling from his mouth. The entire restaurant erupted in shocked silence. David flexed his knuckles and turned to the 5 security guards, who were now backing away slowly. "Anyone else want to hit a lady tonight?" The guards looked at each other nervously. This wasn't some poor construction worker they could intimidate. This was someone with serious money and power. "I didn't think so," David said. "Drop the batons and get out. All of you, now." The security guards dropped their weapons and practically ran for the exit. David then turned to Victoria, and to everyone's amazement, he dropped to one knee in front of her like he was greeting royalty. "Chairman Victoria," he said formally, "I sincerely apologize for allowing this situation to escalate. I arrived early to ensure your security, but I failed to anticipate this level of unprofessionalism." Victoria touched her bruised cheek gently, then looked down at David with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "Thank you. David, you can get up now." David rose and addressed the entire restaurant in a voice that commanded attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Victoria Sterling, Chairman and CEO of Sterling International. The woman you watched being assaulted owns this building. She owns the company that owns this restaurant. She owns half the restaurants in this city." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Phone cameras that had been recording Victoria's humiliation were now shakily focused on her face as the wealthy diners realized exactly who they had been laughing at. Victoria slowly removed the scarf from around her hair, revealing elegant styling underneath. She stood straighter, and the quiet dignity that Silas had noticed transformed into commanding presence of a woman used to running boardrooms and making decisions. "David is my head of security," Victoria said, her voice now carrying the authority that Marco had mocked just minutes before. "I often dine anonymously to see how my establishments treat ordinary customers. Tonight, I learned more than I bargained for." She looked down at Marco, who was struggling to sit up with blood on his chin and terror in his eyes. "You said you were king of this restaurant," Victoria said calmly. "Well, kings can be overthrown. You're fired. Security will escort you out. And my lawyers will be in touch about assault charges." Marco's face went white. The restaurant buzzed with whispered conversations as the reality sank in. The wealthy diners who had been filming and laughing were now quietly deleting videos, hoping Victoria hadn't noticed their participation. But Victoria wasn't paying attention to them. She turned to face Silas, who was still standing protectively in front of his daughter, wearing the same quiet dignity he'd had all evening. "Thank you," Victoria said softly, walking toward him. "Thank you for being my husband tonight. You're the bravest man I've ever met." Silas looked embarrassed by the praise. "I just did what anyone should do, ma'am." "No." Victoria shook her head. "Most people would have looked the other way. Most people would have protected themselves first." She glanced around at the other diners who had done exactly that. "You risked everything to defend a stranger's dignity." She carefully removed his old jacket from her shoulders and helped him put it back on, treating the worn fabric like it was made of gold. "I have a confession," Victoria continued. "I wasn't here by accident. I often visit my restaurants anonymously to see how staff treat customers who don't appear wealthy. But I never expected to find someone like you." Little Lily tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, is the nice lady really a queen?" Victoria laughed and knelt down to Lily's level. "Not a queen, sweetie. Just someone who runs a business. But your daddy is the real hero tonight." She stood up and addressed Silas directly. "I'd like to invite you and Lily to join me at the VIP table. Dinner is on me. Order anything you want, including those red lobsters Lily was admiring." Lily's eyes went wide with excitement. "Ma'am, that's very generous, but we couldn't—" Silas started. "Please." Victoria interrupted gently. "It would be my honor." and I have a business proposition. I'm always looking for good people, and I need someone in HR who understands how to treat people with respect, regardless of their circumstances. Are you interested in discussing a position? Silas stared at her in amazement. You'd offer me a job? After tonight? Especially after tonight. Victoria smiled. Anyone can manage people when times are easy, but someone who stands up for what's right when it costs them everything. That's the person I want working with me. Outside the restaurant windows, snow continued to fall, creating a perfect backdrop for new beginnings. Victoria raised a glass of champagne. To kindness, courage, and second chances. Silas and Lily raised their glasses of cider. Happy New Year, they all said together. As midnight struck,
Wow! I literally jumped out of my seat when David punched Marco. Justice served hot. But friends, the moment that stuck with me wasn't the billionaire reveal. It was when Silas, a man with nothing, stood up to protect a woman being bullied. He risked his safety for a stranger's honor. That is rare. Victoria found something more valuable than profits that night. She found a good man. Never be afraid to stand up for what's right, even if you stand alone. I'm Vera, wishing you a brave and happy New Year. See you next time.